in our age where everything's on the internet, I don't think you necessarily need to go abroad to get that quality of education. But having said that, you do get an experience of living outside your own context, outside your own cultural context. And I think that makes you really grow as a person, because you see yourself as an outsider. Like I never, till I was there, I never saw myself as an outsider. And of course, people have, even within India, I'm sure there are a lot of experiences that you have in your social groups where, okay, you have that feeling of an outsider, but it's not in this very magnified sense when you're abroad, because it's like all of your assumptions don't hold true over there, because it's a new context altogether. For me, I had my OPT in hand, what I was telling you about, that I had my OPT in hand, but I still chose to come back just because I was very lonely over there. So there's a trade-off between what you want and, I guess, like, you're always choosing, right? So you need to see what you put more value on. And I think for me, I was really just missing being home. Okay, so I was in a very intense program, and also a very intense academic school. So you understand, there is a, like, even within the schools over there, I think they have this kind of um they have like subcultures within the school. So like Chicago is this very, they take pride in the fact that everybody's depressed over there, because they're so intellectual. So they have this kind of pride with that. No, I'm just joking.
Got it, got it. Okay, so if we have to switch the bars here, and let's say we reflect back and talk about the journey where it began. So it starts with you selecting the course and the college. So how did you go about that? Was it by your own research uh, of, first say, narrowing down the course or the college? What was your whole selection journey like?
Yeah, so as I told you, I got a lot of rejections, 15 rejections. I think this was in January, February. So before that, I think for my PhD, I had done a lot of research, because that one entire year, I would go to every university website, then go to the departmental website, and then see what each professor's research interest was and where my research interest and the professor's research interest would align. So that's how I went about for looking for PhD programs.
Mhm.
Um, but for my master's, I was already very late into the process, because I only started looking for master's programs, I think in end of February or early March. So by then it was, most schools had, and a lot of, in the US, they don't have many master's programs for psychology students, because it's more like after their undergrad, people go in for their PhD, and during the course of the PhD, they earn a master's degree, because after 2 years they write a thesis, and that's how they get their master's degree. So I think I had very few options left, and so it was a very simple process for me. I just went to the university websites and saw that, okay, these were a couple of universities that I was interested in, and if they had a master's program and they were still accepting applications, I applied. So I applied to 5 master's programs.
Okay.
Actually, I applied to 3, and then 2 of my PhD applications got sent to the master's programs within that school.
So, okay, so that covered your course selection journey, or let's say your college selection journey. You applied to 5 universities, like you said, for masters. And how many admits did you receive?
Um, I got 3 and I got rejected from 2.
So, when you received these 3 admits, all these universities were like in the range of University of Chicago, or were they? I mean, what was the category? How would you categorize these 3, and how did you choose one from these 3?
I don't know how I would categorize it, because yeah, I wouldn't be able to say, but I'll tell you how I chose the
Mhm.
3. So there was University of Chicago, NYU, and Maryland University.
Okay.
So Maryland, because it was a clinical psych program, and by that time I had already understood, okay, clinical is not what I want to do. So that was an easy no. And then it was between NYU and U Chicago. U Chicago, I was very keen on because it's a great school, and you've always heard so much about like the research culture over there. So I was very, very, very inclined towards that. And I got a little bit of funding from U Chicago. And on the other hand, NYU was going to be New York, and it was going to be 2 years in New York, and I know how expensive that can be because my friend was staying in New York and she did a master's there, so I knew that would be very expensive. So I think that just made my decision very easy. I knew that this is going to be very expensive, and this is what I wanted to do, and they had offered me a little bit of money, so I took that off.
And when you think about this journey of applying to, let's say, in total about 18 universities, right? 15 plus, let's say, 2 got transferred to masters and 3 more. So 18 universities you applied to. Okay, so number one, that's a lot to do. But if you have to think about the SOP LOR journey, I think you really literally tore your brain muscles apart, because writing for 18 universities would have taken a toll on you, is what I sense. So how was your LOR SOP journey around that
Um, LOR, I mean, very grateful to the professors who were kind enough to, individually submit my LORs to every program that I applied to. So I'm very, very grateful to them. They were all my Manipal professors.
time?
And I think SOP, I would say that when I started doing my research for how I want to structure my SOP, I didn't take any professional help for it. I just read a bunch of SOPs online. I saw a lot of the advice that they give online. And what I started to figure was that, okay, you can write one. So some people like to start from a blank sheet of paper, but I was not one of those. Like, I wish I was one of those, but I was not, like, because I was also doing a master's program. And I don't think that I would have said anything uh, completely different from what I did, like from the, let's say, if I'm comparing two SOPs. So it was pretty similar. I think I wanted to say similar things. Of course, you have the last paragraph where you tailor your, and I think that there were like smaller edits that you make through the SOP, that you tailor it according to each program. But I had pretty much a template, and then I would edit the last paragraph the most. And
Right.
yeah. So that was.
Got it. So, so it was broadly your own online research to look around how ideal SOP is built, or was it also some help that you sought from, let's say, alumni or your university professors or any sort of outside agents like counselors? How did you think about that?
Yeah, I didn't take any help for writing the SOP, but I had 2 3 people who were very, very kind, and they, through the whole process, like, they would give me their feedback. And actually, not, I would say more, I think like 5 6 people that I would, send it to. A bunch of, some professors that I know who were teaching abroad, but like I didn't know them personally. My mom, like, through connections, like random connections, and people are just kind generally. So yeah, they would read it and give me feedback. So yeah, I got that kind of help, but again, it was all help. I mean, it was not like professional help or anything.
Got it. So there were no counselors or agents involved. It was just personal contacts that you made use of, and like you said, people are kind, so it made out.
Yeah.
If you now, let's say you completed that phase of going through 18 applications of, let's say, applying, uh, getting 15 rejections is sort of a thing that I would want to reflect more upon, because that is, number one, inspiring for everyone that hears it. And I think now that you proudly mention it, I think you have come out as a learner, as a sort of practitioner for getting inspired by failures or rejections. So, how was the mental journey back then when these rejections were coming one after the other and 15 in number? Was it tolling, or were you like, that's okay, I can go ahead?
I think when you put so much value on something, I think, of course, you do, you do feel that little prick of failure, because you get insecure and you're like, maybe I'm not good enough, and you start doubting yourself. But to everybody who's watching, please do not take it personally. It's just like how a job application is. It's, there are so many factors, and sometimes your application is not even read because they use the GRE scores as a filtering process.
Right.
So, you probably were weeded out in the first round. So maybe nobody even got to your SOP. So it has nothing to do with your personal journey or your, not nothing to do, but I don't think that one should take that serious, to take that personally. And I think I recovered from it pretty fast, just because I was already applying for my master's program. So I knew, okay, this is not happening. So this is what I'm going to do next. So I think that got my mind off it, and probably that's what I was so. Maybe that's why I even ended up doing a master's degree, because I got so many rejections. I was like, I can also prove it that I can. But I think like, just don't take that personally. And I did not get one rejection after the other. A lot of schools wrote back to me like after 3 months or 4 months. I just understood that when I was not hearing back for interviews, I think I understood that that this is not happening. So yeah, some of them I didn't even have to face the rejection. I kind of just assumed that I was being rejected.
Got it. So you also mentioned that you gave in a GRE, which you think is one of the blanket criteria for all the students. What was your GRE, let's say, preparation journey?
So I left mathematics when I was in 10th grade. Okay, I was 15 years old, and this is me as a 24-year-old again planning to, start studying mathematics right from the fundamentals. So I think I was very nervous about that. So I had like a personal, I would like, it was like 14-year-olds and me who would go for tuition. So I did that. And then, so that was my math preparation. I think verbal I did on my own. That wasn't so, that was not very overwhelming for me. It was mathematics, which was much more overwhelming. And I also, in fact, took Jamboree classes. I don't know if you know of Jamboree.
Yeah, I am familiar with the name.
Yeah, so I think that helped. But in hindsight, if I would have to, tell somebody, does it really, like, should you go in for these kind of classes? I don't think so. I think that, even like, I think what really helped was just taking a lot of papers. Solving a lot of papers and sitting for those 3 hours when nobody's disturbing you and just getting yourself in that testing mindset. I think that was more helpful than classes itself. I'm not saying that the classes weren't good enough. The classes were good. I just think that my receptiveness to the classes weren't as good. Just because I think for me, doing just helps me get into that process more than actually only learning. So I think the personal tuitions that I got, and the papers, that is what really helped me.
So this procedure went on for like how many months? Preparation, giving exams for 2 times.
Yes, I don't know exactly, but so from the first exam to the second exam, I don't think there was a lot of gap. Probably a month. But from when I started, I think it took me almost a year to prepare for it.
This course selection journey, I mean, you were a psychology student, let's say, in Manipal as well. But then there are multiple verticals to psychology, even when you come to different courses and different sort of things. So how did you narrow down your choice to applying to these 5 colleges only, and these 5 colleges itself? So 5 courses only. So what was your selection journey for this course, and how did you go about it?
Yeah, so I think for the 2 programs that I already told you, my application got directed to the master's program, so that I didn't have much choice in. I did interview for it.
That direction of applications to master, that happened because of your request, or it was like an automatic process?
No, it's an automatic process. So once you get rejected from the PhD program, then they send it. If they have like a independent master's program, then they send it to the independent master's program.
Okay.
So University of Maryland and Pennsylvania State University sent it to the master's program, and I got I got through the University of Maryland's master's program, but because that was a clinical psych program that I told you about, I think that was out. And University of Chicago, it was an extremely flexible program, and I could choose any course that I wanted from any of the grad schools at University of Chicago. So I thought that it makes sense for me if I'm trying to figure out what I want to specialize in like further, because I knew that clinical psychology is not what I wanted to do. So I think just it would give me more leeway in figuring that out. So I think I was very interested for that reason. um, and then NYU, a friend of mine was actually in the same program that I applied to.
Okay.
And she had good things to say about it. But when I did some of my research online, I understood that some people had, some people were, it was more, it was more in the style of an undergrad degree, and it was not as research oriented. And I was looking for a course that was research oriented. So that's why I chose the uh, master's in social science at U Chicago, because that was a very research oriented course. Yeah.
Got it. And probably all this while you had this criteria to also shortlist on the basis of university world ranking or the course world ranking, because obviously one needs to apply for the best. So probably you were following a list. Is that correct, for applying to the top universities only?
Yes, I did that in the beginning when I was applying for my PhD. I mean, not that. So you would just use it as like that would be the first thing that you would do, and then after you go on the website, then of course it's much more because research interest is, because when you're doing a PhD, it doesn't really matter what the university ranking is. It's much more about the professor's research interest. So
right.
I think for my master's, yes, I did look at it, but I was not very concerned on that at that time. I was just like, whoever takes me.
Got it. Got it. So if you have to now reflect on, let's say, the family's mental journey, if it's to do with you preparing your parents, or probably they were on board since day one, or let's say your family, how was that journey like? Was it a thing in your family's minds that, okay, she's to go abroad now, and you were also on the same line, or was it your thought and then you convinced them? How was that personal journey?
I think my mother has always been very supportive of whatever I wanted to do. And again, she was very supportive of this also. So she was on board, and I told her that, okay, this is what I want to do. And also it was a long, like from the time that I actually made like a sincere decision that, okay, that I want to go abroad. I think that was in 2017 when I left my job in Mumbai and then I came back home. So it was a long journey, and I think through that, of course, there were a lot of conversations about finances, about the cost, about does it make sense, and all of those things that you discuss. But as just they were very supportive in every way of like the finances and just my decision. So yeah.
Now, I would want to deep dive a little into the job opportunities, particularly in India, with this course. Now, you have a different path wherein you'll be going for a PhD, and there is a different sort of careers after that. But if one has to think about careers on a broader level in psychology in India, what are the various options that one could exercise?
Yeah, I think, of course, within psychology, there are many sub disciplines. So one is organizational psychology. The other, there's sports psych. There's so many. There's sports psychology. Then there's counseling. Then there's clinical psychology. There's cognitive psychology. So, so I think depending on which discipline you choose to specialize in, so your career decisions will be based on that. So there are a lot of opportunities, I think, in right from academia to industry to most MNCs now want organizational psychologists to be in-house, so that they can transition with all the conflicts, that the internal conflicts that they have, and just everybody, there's so much of a discussion. I don't know how much gets materialized, but there's so much of a discussion currently in our country about mental health. So
Right.
there are a lot of opportunities in psychology. And
If you now have to reflect on your personality, there's just a couple of more questions and then we'll close it. So if you have to reflect on your personality and draw a contrast between pre-US, post-US, how has that been evolved and changed for you?
I think a lot has changed just because of the experiences that I had over there. And I would say not particularly in the university environment, but just otherwise. Then I started going for these Vedanta classes, and I think that really changed my understanding of certain things. So I think a lot has changed in that sense. And again, what I said at the beginning, you start looking at yourself as an outsider, and you start understanding what it feels to be that. Not I think people were very nice generally, but the subtle things that you pick up on about your own, what assumptions that people might have about your culture, or the assumptions that you may have about how it is to be living in America, or your expectations, your insecurities. So I think everything, just because you're not in your comfort zone, I think, and this is like an obvious thing, right? It happens every time, if you take up a new job, it's like, your insecurities, everything, like, it's because it's so new, everything gets amplified. And I think that's exactly what happened to me. And because there was nobody there, at least for the first 6 months that I was there, nobody, once I would come home, it's not like I'm speaking to my mother or my sister and like telling them about this, what happened today, and like trying to analyze it. It's like you with your own mind. And then during COVID, that's what it was. I was completely alone. My roommate also left. So I think it helped me deal with a lot of things in that sense, just like my own psyche. Um, yeah.
But prima facie, if I have to draw out insights of what you just said, it broadly narrows down to the point of you getting to spend a lot of time, probably forcibly or non-voluntarily, with yourself, so that, and that enables you to learn just so much and discover so much about yourself, that with time your mind gets clear of what decisions one should make for oneself. And I think that is a blanket rule that applies to every mindset, uh, to spend time with yourself, and that is what one can really take out of it, of what you said.
Yeah. And I think you start appreciating your culture so much more, because you take these things for granted, right? Because since you've come to this world, all of these things were just there. You didn't have to think about these things as a third person, but once you're there, you're actually thinking about it. And how would an American think about this, and and also your meet and the good thing about America is that you're meeting people from all of these different cultural contexts, because you're just not meeting Americans, right? You're seeing
Right.
so many other people of other nationalities over there. So I think that really helped me to appreciate my own culture. And yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to your next steps right now, it's probably going to be PhD next, right? I mean, probably there's also a job in between. Is it? What is your next step particularly?
Yeah, so I am starting a new job this month itself, and it's just an editing job. So I am, trying to gain more experience in my own right, like, however I can. Uh, Basically, I'm trying to like work on my skills, my writing skills, and also editing. It's nice to, be in touch with that literature and keep reading about new ideas, so that, your mind keeps working. And given the circumstances, I think it's ideal because I'll be working from home, and it'll give me a lot of flexibility to do research for my PhD program. So that's what it is. It's going to be work from home. I'm going to be editing articles, and I'm going to be thinking about my research statement and my research programs.
So, how do you keep yourself updated with your knowledge base? Is it through reading, podcasts, documentaries, movies, talking to people? What is your source of learning for like a day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of podcasts, reading and like talking to people, but the talking to people has not happened as much since I've come back home. But it's I mean, like, even talking to my mother, I think it may not be academic or whatever, but like there is so much insight because I am interested in human beings. So that's still a data point for me. So yeah, I think just like there are certain people that I follow, and there are certain areas of interest that I follow. So I think it just like keeps branching out from there.
Got it. Right. Okay, so picking up from your knowledge base, what are any, let's say, two recommendations that you would like to give someone? It may be a book, it may be a podcast, it may be a documentary, any sort of information material that you would want to exercise. Uh,
So there are two people that I really have been following. One I'm sure is pretty famous in India because he's a global sensation. One is Jordan Peterson, and so he's one person that I think for the past 3-4 years that I follow and listen to.
mhm.
And the second one would be huh, um, it's not a person, but I have started to study Vedanta. So I look for a lot of material related to that. And there's one Swami that I follow, Swami Sarvapyananda, and so I listen to his lectures. So I'm interested in that.
So you also mentioned Vedanta earlier in the conversation once, and I intended to ask, I mean, now that you mentioned again, what is it about exactly on a broader level? If you have to explain, what is this Vedanta thing about?
Yeah, Vedanta. So Vedanta is basically the culmination of the Vedas.
Okay.
So it has like a lot of insights from the Upanishads, and um, it's Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutras. But I am very new
Okay.
to the study. But I think as a student of psychology, there is just so much that I've learned. It's I think they have such a holistic understanding of what it is to be a human being, and just the relationship of a human being with uh, the world and the environment, that I think it's really deepened my understanding. So yeah, I
Oh, thank you for sharing that. So I think with that, I'm done with all my questions. Is there anything else you would like to share? Probably then we can end this podcast.
To whoever is watching, I would again say, and I've said this too many times, but everybody's journey is very different. And, I think that one should always keep that in mind when they're taking advice from people, or also when they're just trying to understand other people's journey and then trying to reflect on what they should do. I think they should always have that in mind, because there's just so many different factors that sometimes we might not even be consciously aware of. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that.